Welcome to Beyond Words Presents. I am here with Terri Daniel, the founder and president of the Afterlife Awareness Conference. Welcome to the show, Terri.
Thank you.
It's so great
to be here.
It's so great to have you actually physically here too.
In the Beyond Words office.
In the Beyond Words office. And I want to remind everybody out there who's watching that you can participate in this conversation as well. Use the hashtag BWPresents, and you can also use the Google Hangouts app. And be sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube as well. Excuse me. So Terri, one of the things that just came up for me as soon as I started thinking about what I wanted to ask you was, why an afterlife conference? Why not? There's a million other conferences that you could have done, but why an afterlife conference?
Partly because there's a million other conferences. Because, well, for me personally, it was the result of my own spiritually transformative experience with death and beyond. And starting the conference specifically was because when my first book, A Swan in Heaven, came out, and I was going out and teaching and talking to bereaved parents, there's a national organization for bereaved parents that's huge, that has a big conference every year, and they wouldn't let me speak there because they wouldn't allow any information about mysticism or metaphysics or after-death communication or psychic phenomena or mediumship. It was absolutely against the rules. And I did some investigating into this and found out that a lot of other authors and teachers in this field were also turned down from speaking at that conference. And so I said, I have to start my own conference. I have to create a place where people who are interested in death or grieving or working in the field of death can get access to this information. So that's why.
Awesome. Well, and what was that, if you don't mind talking about it, what was that spiritually transformative experience?
Well, it wasn't a big shock like it is for some people because I had always been intuitive and mystical. But my son, when he was 10 years old, was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, and he died when he was 16. And through those years, I developed a real intuitive style of communication with him. He eventually lost the ability to speak. And so we communicated telepathically. And I was doing a lot of meditation and a lot of work in the spirit realm. And I had channelers and guides and teachers working with me. And they said, hey, as soon as he leaves his body, he's going to start talking to you again. And he did, big time. And 30 minutes after he died, he said, here I am. This is what we plan to do in this life. Let's get this party started. Come on, high five. Let's do this. Let's write a book. We got work to do.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was what got me on this path.
So it's amazing that it was only half an hour after he passed that you were able to reconnect with him. Was it almost like a release for you, or like you spoke about it a little bit in the book that I read really quickly, but it was almost like he had to have his time here on Earth in order to be able to do the full work of what he needed to do. And I guess it kind of speaks to your understanding of death too.
Well, we all have to, have exactly the amount of time on Earth that we have in order to do this work. Both realms, the physical and the non-physical realm, work hand in hand. They're not separate at all. So everything that we're doing is part of our work there, is part of our work here. It's all interconnected. So our work doesn't stop just because we leave the body. Not just the work that we're doing with other people, but the work that we're doing on ourselves. A lot of people, like my son, for example, come in specifically to be a sponsor for others, for the growth of others. So someone like him who was severely ill and disabled, if we look at the meaning of life, why are we here? What does it mean? You look at something like that.
A little question.
Yeah, it's just this little everyday cocktail party discussion. You ask questions like that. Why would a child suffer, or be born like that?
Absolutely.
Why would 1 million people die in an earthquake? And the traditional answers don't give us anything we can use. Well, it's God's will, or it's random. We don't know. We shouldn't ask. Or the people were being punished for their sins. This stuff. And so what we try to do at the Afterlife Conference is really find answers. Like, maybe there's something else. Maybe there's a reason why these things happen. So you look at a situation like my son, and the reason just came so clear to me, that he was here to teach me some lessons that I came in desiring to have. And as a result of this agreement, it was like we sat around a table just like this in the interlife and had a conversation with all our friends. And I said, well, in the next life, I think I want to be a spiritual teacher. And I really need to do some work on grief and letting go. And he's this little soul sitting next to me, and he says, I can help you with that. I'll come in as your kid, and I'll have this disease, and I'll die, and then I'll talk to you afterwards, and we'll start a conference, and we'll write books. And we say, great plan. Let's go to Earth and
Let's go do this.
Let's go do this. The minute you get to Earth, you forget all that.
Yeah.
And you think, why is this happening? I would have never chosen this. So that's sort of the long version of the story.
Well, I just think that's fascinating. I actually I volunteer for Make-A-Wish, and so we encounter lots of kids who have life-threatening illnesses, and frequently, people say to the parents, I'm so sorry that your kid is going through this, and to think of them as a teacher, as a sponsor, as you're saying your son was for you, like that, it gives it a purpose. It gives it it's less just random and painful too.
Exactly.
And that's really beautiful. Thank you.
And it's wonderful that you volunteer for Make-A-Wish. They're great. But if a parent said that to you, why did this happen to my kid? You could never say what we just said.
No.
No, you can't say that to civilians.
Yeah.
But it does. It gives meaning. And in grief counseling, one of the primary things that we know in grief counseling is to help the person find some meaning in the event, so that it's not empty and meaningless. And so what we're talking about here is finding meaning helps you find peace, because like we were talking about earlier, the way we perceive death is a choice.
Yeah.
The way we perceive disability is a choice. The way we perceive marriage is a choice. Everything. So you can go through your life thinking God is punishing you for being gay or something, or it's just random and meaningless and we don't know, and it's above our heads and we don't know. Or you can think this. You get to choose.
Yeah. Well, and I love that phrase, that the way we perceive death is a choice, because it seems like that's just not true. Like the way we perceive death is handed to us from generations of learning and of people going through it, and the pain and the loss and all of that stuff. And so it almost seems like no, that's not a choice. This is how death is. And I love the fact that you're opening it up to the different perspectives. And we were talking right before we started on this interview about an experience that you actually had this morning about would you talk a little bit about that, because you tell it so beautifully.
A very good friend of mine called me last week. Her mother-in-law was dying, and I went over to their house a few days ago and talked to the son, who was the primary caregiver of the mother, and just spent some time with the family members that were there and sort of taught them how to be a good death midwife. And they had a hospice, they had hospice care and a hospice chaplain, but I was really giving them some instruction on what to expect from seeing someone die and how to take care of themselves and rituals and things that they could do. And she died this morning, and I went back over there. And it was quite beautiful, beautiful family. They were all standing around the bed and talking and laughing and reminiscing. And one of them said, oh, she always wore too much perfume, because when ladies get older, they lose their sense of smell. And a lot of older women just douse themselves with perfume. So we were laughing about this. And we were in her bedroom, and I went over to her little dressing table, and I found the perfume bottle. And I said to the two sons, why don't you take this perfume and anoint her with it, And they went, wow, what a great idea. Anointing like a priest would do. It was so sacred. So they took the perfume and they just dabbed it on her, and it was so beautiful to have a ritual like that. The simplest things that you can do, There was a vase of flowers next to the bed, and I took a flower out and put it in her hair, and just little things. People are so afraid of death and afraid of handling a dead person.
Yes.
That they don't think to do things like, put perfume on them. Another friend of mine, her brother died, and she was an artist, and she told me that she drew pictures on his body before he was cremated. She got a Sharpie and just drew things and wrote messages on his skin.
Yeah, that to me, it's very strange to hear that, because I am one of those that I have that kind of, I wouldn't even dream of touching a dead body. I was telling you earlier, when my grandpa died, our whole family was there and it was wonderful, but as soon as he died, it was just, I believe, and this was a while ago, but I believe we'd all just left the room and then let the hospice nurses take care of his body. And I just love that idea of it's the family kind of sending their loved one off into the next life. Or
this is how it's always been since the beginning of time.
What happened?
This is not a new idea.
What happened?
The Industrial Revolution happened.
Really?
Yeah, and so what happened in all of time up until then, people worked at home. You worked on your farm, or you were a blacksmith or whatever, and the family was very close. You were all focused on your land and your home. And when somebody died, they died at home. They were sick. They were cared for at home. They didn't have health insurance. They didn't go to hospitals. And when someone died, you put them on the kitchen table. You buried them on your own land, on your farm. And then when people left the farm and went to work in factories and in cities and left the home, everything else left the home too. And illness, death, religion, education, kids going to the little schoolhouse. I mean, everything just moved away from the land, essentially. So that's where that went. And now we're afraid to touch a dead body. We don't know what to do with one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally me.
Yeah.
Well, and just to get kind of back to the Afterlife Awareness Conference, and what you were speaking of about what you were able to do for your friend's family this morning, you referred to that kind of as death midwifery. And I know that one of the courses in the conference that you have was specifically on that. And so what are some other topics that you are either regularly sure to bring into the conference, or ones that people really are excited about when you do bring them in?
Well, we are going to always have something related to bereavement and grief. We want to be careful that we are not perceived as a grief conference, because there are a lot of grief conferences and they approach grief a little differently than we do. So we had, for instance, this year, Tom Zuba doing something called a new way to do grief, where yes, grief hurts, yes, we're suffering, yes, we're grieving and we're mourning, but we don't become our grief, we don't identify with it, we use it and incorporate it in who we are and who we are becoming, and it can become a gift in many ways. So we always have something like that. We're hoping to have David Kessler next year, who's a huge, great teacher on grief. And we're always looking for new and unusual approaches to everything. So we've got Erica Hyatt coming next year, who's talking about children's perceptions of the afterlife.
Interesting.
And she did her research on that, her PhD research. So that's going to be totally fascinating.
Absolutely.
And we always have a shaman of some sort doing a ceremony or other kinds of presentations. And next year we have a woman doing something called a pushing over ceremony for suicides. And that's a shamanic practice where if you feel that your loved one's soul is struggling, for whatever reason you might feel that, there are things you can do to push them over into the light. Now, we can't really do that. It's really up to that person's soul to do it at the pace that they need to. But if we have a lot of pain and attachment, thinking, oh, my loved one committed suicide and I'm worried about his well-being, this ceremony can help you relieve that. So it's specifically for suicides. So we're always looking for unique approaches.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because near-death experiences and afterlife conversations have actually become more integrated into society now. I mean, with the extremely popular books like Proof of Heaven with Dr. Evan Alexander and Raymond Moody and people like that who are really bringing this into the public consciousness. What is it that you're pushing for? Like, what is the next thing? What are we doing with all of this information that we're getting?
Such a good question. What is the next thing? We talk about this. This is one of my favorite conversations that I have with Raymond Moody all the time. Because we say, we've been collecting stories about near-death experience for years and years and years. Now, we've gone 10,000 stories. They're very consistent. There are a few variations, but essentially they are pretty much all saying the same thing. And we have this big body of information and research now. What are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
And what we hope to do with it, at least me speaking for myself, is to make people more conscious about death and to take away that fear of the dead body and the fear of discussing death. And to take it another step further, if we can make friends with death, and in shamanism, we say death is an ally, then we can live better. Because death, fear of death is at the root of all neurotic behavior when you really think about it. Because what people think happens when they die is that they disappear.
Yes.
Which really means their identity, their personality, their ego disappears. So we go through our whole life always wanting our ego to lead and be up front, look at me, how does my hair look? I mean, that's the stuff we're really afraid of losing.
Yeah.
And that really is about death, fear of death.
Like that fear of disappearance, that fear,
the ego's fear of disappearance.
Yeah, well, and one of the things I also saw in your book was that you broke it down into 3 different fears. There was the fear of, I believe it was judgment, the fear of like leaving everything behind, and I'm not going to remember the third one, but that's also something that I'm curious about for you, because when we all of these stories that we have about the afterlife, they all seem really happy and wonderful, and yet we have this world religion that has taught us forever that there is heaven and then there's a hell, and how do you reconcile that? Have you seen experiences of hell, or is it all?
I love this question. I was thinking about this on the way over here, that I wanted to talk about this. So, and this is really actually much easier to understand than you think. People who have near-death experiences, the reason we know about them is because they come back. They don't stay dead. So they're just kind of walking over the threshold, and they're in the foyer, in the entryway, so to speak. And what happens in that entryway is you have what they call a life review. And so, like they say, your life flashes before your eyes. Yeah. And it is something like this, and this has been reported by thousands and thousands of near-death people. And in that life review, you experience the feelings and the emotions of everything that you created in this lifetime, including the pain that you might have created for other people. And so for some people, that life review can be very uncomfortable. And especially somebody who's carrying this huge burden of guilt. Let's say they did something really bad and they never told anybody and they took it to their grave. Yeah. And so in that foyer, in that life review, they're going to have to look at that and process that. And that would feel like torment. Yeah. And then they're resuscitated, boom, they're back in their body. They come back and they say, I had a near-death experience and I went to hell.
So because it's just that.
It's just that experience. Okay. And it probably does feel like hell. Yeah. And, that's a good reason to be a good person and have a good life, and live honestly so that you don't have to have that experience. So there are reports like that. And there are reports where they'll say they'll see demons and things like that. But they're the internal demons. They're projections of our dark stuff, of fear and guilt and rage. So those are sort of the exceptions to the rule of near-death reports. The rest of them are happy and blissful, and everybody's there in the light and there's love and
wonderful place. You can't even describe how amazing it is.
But again, those people are just in the foyer too.
As well.
Yeah. So they come back. So how do we know what happens
after that?
Yeah. And way down there or down the hallway. Yeah. And the only way we really know that is from what we get from mediums and channelers who are talking to non-physical beings of all kinds.
Well, you've spoken, you continue to speak with your son?
Yes.
And has he shared with you what his experience has been and what he's seen? And
very much so.
And does that give, I'm guessing it gives you comfort?
I guess you could say it gives me comfort. I never really had discomfort about it, but it fascinates me. And because of the things that he told me about what he calls the journey of the soul, which is birth, death, and beyond, that's what got me interested in all this work, and that's what got me interested in going to school and studying theology and everything that I've done, because I realized that it's a revolving door between birth and death. There is no actual veil. You know, all that world is going on all around us right now. My son is, you know, kind of like, I'm a little wind-up toy with the wind-up thing in my back, and he's telling me what to say. And, you know, we're all working on this stuff together.
I love that. I personally, we always get to a point where you start to judge yourself for decisions you've made or choices that you've made or anything like that. And the idea that you're not making those choices alone. There are people around you that you can't necessarily see that are supporting you in that decision or helping you make that choice, and having that those two worlds together. Because I guess I've always thought of them as many people do, I'm sure, is like there's this world, and then there's a line, and then there's the other world, and that line, of course, is death. And so is that what your conference, is that what you're seeking to do with your conference, is really to bring that closer and give other people that understanding?
I think for me personally, what I would really like in my wish is to help people shift their theology a little bit. Because what causes people a lot of pain about death and grief is they still, even though they're New Age thinkers and they're enlightened, there's still a little seed of that thing that there's this God in the sky out there that's making things happen, and that they really have no control. And so my personal goal is to try to educate people to see that that is not really the way it is. You know, that's a pretty bold statement, but that line, God is not on the other side of that line. There is no line. So if there's no separation, I mean, this is what Buddhism's been saying forever. There's no separation. And so one good way to learn and experience what no separation feels like is to be able to communicate across that line. So if you can talk to dead people, if you can channel and receive guidance from teachers and beings on the other side of that line, then the veil thins in your knowledge and in your awareness. And the more that veil thins, the more you realize that this thing we know as God that supposedly lives on the other side of the line isn't over there. We're part of it. You know, it's like this piece of paper is God and this God is us. We're in the middle of it. It's not over here, you know. That's a huge shift in thinking.
Absolutely. Well, I have to be responsible. I'm super fascinated. Thank you so much. But I just wanted to tell our viewers that we do have a great discount on the let me see if I can get it right. The broadcast of the live stream of the Afterlife Awareness Conference that actually just happened in the beginning of June. And you guys had some great speakers. Would you speak to those a little bit and let people know what they'll be getting?
Sure. Well, we had Evan Alexander for our second year in a row. He's pretty well known. And Dr. Raymond Moody for the third year in a row. You've probably heard of him too. Our mediums are amazing. Suzanne Northrup, we have her gallery demonstration, and this year she worked with Gary Schwartz from the University of Arizona, who did scientific experiments on mediums in the lab at the university. So they do a little demonstration of that. I can't remember exactly what was on the live stream. We have one of our shamans, Kitty Edwards, and she does something called the Aya Despacho, which is a sacred grieving ceremony where you build kind of an object made of paper and seeds and things that contains your grief for people who are grieving. And I think she takes those and buries them or burns them. I'm not sure what happens at the end because I never get to go to the presentations at the conference.
Too busy.
Too busy. So I never saw what happens at the end of the Aya Despacho.
Well, hopefully next year.
Yeah.
Well, you can get that. There's 9 videos, and within those videos, there's several different speakers, and you can get that for this just until Sunday for a discount of about 50%. It's $49.95, and if you do purchase it, you will get a code and instructions on how to watch those videos on Monday the 7th. So be sure to get it before Sunday the 6th because it's a great deal. I mean, it's usually around $80, so to get it for $100, I'm sorry. So to get it for that $50 price is really phenomenal, and there's some great speakers in it from what I've heard.
And I think that was the price you were offering at the conference, wasn't it?
I think we were offering I think for full price still there, but this is like, it's very exclusive for just this presentation. This
so come on down and watch the live stream.
Yeah, and you can get it at www.beyondword.com/Daniel, Daniel. So be sure to go grab that real quick, because yes, it's only until Sunday. So then, Terri, I'm so fascinated by your experience with your son, and I know that he has continued to, as you said, he continues to be with you. Does he help in terms of when you select speakers for the conference? Are you looking for people who kind of help you explain to other people what your experience has been with your son?
Sort of, not really. I don't focus too much on the on myself and my son and our story, and the reason for that is I don't want it to be a grief conference. Yeah. And that story can very easily get tied in with really heavy grieving. And I learned from the first conference that is very sacred and very honored, but our conference isn't really the place for that. Our conference is like when you're looking for an answer, when you're looking to move to the next step in your grief process, then we have something we can give you. But if you're at the place where you still really need to talk to 200 other people who are also deeply grieving and tell your story 200 times and cry, and that's all good stuff, but there are other conferences for that. And so I don't bring my story in that much, because I don't want to lead it too much in that direction. But as far as the communication, what I've learned is that I don't only receive communication from my son, I receive communication from all kinds of things I don't even know what they are, and we're all receiving that. So, you say, does your son help you choose the speakers? Well, he helps me do everything, but it isn't just him. And as the years go by, I mean, it used to be our communication was very direct. Like I would say, Danny, help me figure this thing out. What should I teach at the seminar next week? That kind of stuff. And this pile of information would just unfurl in front of me, and that's how I got a lot of stuff. It's not so much like that now. And a medium explained it to me that it's like a teacher if you have a child in 4th grade, and the teacher says to the child, here's how you do the math problem. Now, you do it. Yes. I'm going to go over here and help another kid. Yes. And so it's kind of like that. So he's kind of got me started, and he's always there. I mean, today when I was with this family, with the mother who died, I had them all gathered around the bed and we held hands. They asked me to do a prayer. I had no idea what I was going to say. I just open up and here comes this amazingly beautiful stuff out of my mouth. And everybody said, oh my God, that was so beautiful. And I didn't do that by myself. They are helping me, and they are helping you, and they're helping all of us. None of us are alone here.
So last week we had a psychic intuitive on, and one of the questions that I asked her, and I similar to what I would want to ask you, but do you believe that we can all communicate with people in the afterlife?
Absolutely. And we all are all the time. How? It's already there. Okay. It's already there. I mean, the way you can do that is to stop the blockages. Okay. Because if you believe that we come from that place, which I like to call the interlife, and I will credit Michael Newton with that term, the place where we are between incarnations, the place we go when we die. It's also the place we go when we dream, or when we meditate, or when we travel out of body. And so if we all come from there, the Buddhists say there's a silver cord that keeps us connected there all the time, like being a scuba diver with the thing. And so that's meant to be part of what we are. We didn't come here. The cord is not cut. And there is an umbilical cord that connects us to what I call heaven. And we're meant to receive divine guidance. And if you look at all history, scriptures of any religion, the sages and the mystics and the saints, we're all receiving something from somewhere. Those people were no different than you and me. And why would it be that only certain biblical heroes and saints and special people can do this.
Yes.
You know, why can Moses do this and not you?
Yeah.
There is no why. You can. We're all capable of opening that conduit. But sometimes you have to do some work to make it open. And the work you have to do is to strengthen your faith. That sounds very much like a televangelist. You must have faith, brothers and sisters. But it's trust, you know. So, I mean, you have intuition, right?
Yeah.
You feel your intuitive hits about things.
Yeah.
And so how much do you trust them?
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
It's almost like if I can logic through it, then I'll trust it. But if I can't logic through it, then I won't. I'll just be kind of like, yeah, that's just me being hopeful. Or me being, you know, down on myself, or I mean, whatever it is that I get, I sometimes accept it if I can accept it logically, and then I don't accept it.
But see, then there's that stopping point. It's like you get to a point and it says stop, but everybody does that.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to trust it. But for example, if you're trying to make a decision, like right now I'm moving and I'm looking for a place to rent, and it's between this one and this one. And I'm constantly trying to logic it out. Well, this is that and this is that.
You're the pro and con.
Yeah, and then finally I just have to say, I give it up.
Yeah.
It will be revealed. It will be shown to me. So it's that kind of trust. But there are also processes and exercises. I have a little document called Writing a Letter from Heaven. That's email me. I'll send it to you. It's on my website.
Okay.
info@afterlifeconference.com. And it's a little 10-step process where you write a letter to yourself from your dead person.
Like from my grandpa?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you would address it to yourself.
Okay.
And write it as if it's him talking. And when you start doing that, you're going to say, oh, this is crap. This is just me making this up.
Yeah.
This is just wishful thinking. This is what I think he would say.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Start with that.
Okay.
And then you just do it and do it and do it and trust it and trust it and trust it. And something will happen. It will gradually feel different.
Okay.
You'll click into a space where stuff will just start coming out of you. Now, I've done this in workshops, and I've had people do this in 5 minutes, but some people it might take 5 years.
You just keep writing.
Yeah, I mean, you have to trust it. Okay. You know, and we have a lot of great psychic development classes at the conference, and you can find them all over the place. You know, this year Austin Wells taught a 4-hour workshop on mediumship, and next year John Holland is going to do that. So there's ways to learn this, and I know James Van Praagh, I believe, also teaches seminars. So it's out there. Go learn. It can be done.
It's very, like, just even when you started talking about that, I kind of got a little choked up. I just got married, and one of the moments that, you know, was sad was that, you know, realizing that my grandpa couldn't be there. Yeah. And then, of course, my dad's side, both my grandma and my grandpa on his side have also passed, and just knowing that they couldn't be there to celebrate that with me was hard. And simultaneously, like, I hear you speak, and I know on some level they were there and they were celebrating with me, and yet there's that little niggling thing in the back of my brain where I'm just like, no,
that can't be true. That's not logical.
Absolutely. Like, they weren't there. That's just what everybody says when they try and make you feel better.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people do say that, you know, but I know, and a lot of people know, that they are there. And there are some people who are so good at this sort of thing, like if one of our mediums, if Austin Wells was there at your wedding, she would give you evidential information. She'd say, you know, there's a man standing behind you. I think his name is Harry or Harold. And you'll say, oh my God, that's my grandfather's name. And people can do that. Wow. You know, and you may not be ever that good at it. I may not be that good. I'm not a medium. What I do is different, but it's real.
So what do you do with the naysayers? Because I'm sure having a conference like this, you end up with, as soon as you tell people about it, not everybody's going to be like, yes, that's awesome. How do you?
Nothing. I mean, what does anybody do with? Everyone's got naysayers and detractors. You know, I've got plenty of detractors. I just try not to, you know, those people obviously are not our people. You know, they're not our audience. Yeah. I wouldn't expect everybody to get this. but the people who do will rise to the occasion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, many years ago, I was talking to Marianne Williamson when I was first starting out as a public speaker on a completely different topic, by the way. This was 25 years ago. And I asked her, I said, you know, when you're talking to an audience, how do you make sure everybody gets it? How do you find the common denominator level to talk to so they all can meet in the middle and get it? She said, you don't ever do that. You talk from exactly where you are. And the people who will get it, and some people will rise up to meet you, and other people won't. But you can't do a common denominator because that's not who you are. So you just talk from your truth. It was the best advice I ever got.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like a brilliant thing to start a conference because then people almost self-select. They see it, they hear about it in one way or another, and then they make their choice to fly, to pay, to be there so that they can learn whatever there is to learn at the conference.
Yes. And we also make it very clear that it's divided into 3 interest tracks. So if you're there because you're looking for scientific evidence of an afterlife through research on near-death experience, you can see which presentations are about science. If you're there for grief, you can see which they're coded. So you can see the code, you know, this one's for grief, this is the one I'm going to go to. Or this one is for like really, you know, out-of-body journeying and, or religious history. I mean, you can pick and choose. So there's we try to make it so there's something for everybody.
That's wonderful. Well, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and it seems like every single year there's more people who come, and you were just mentioning before that you had to actually switch the venue for next year because it has to be bigger.
It has to be bigger.
Because people are just gravitating toward you. I wonder if there's a lot of people coming from that
well, Beyond Words comes and does a live stream and puts these big risers in the room. It takes up a lot of room.
But I love the fact that we get to share this with people who otherwise wouldn't be able to physically be there, that they can come, they can just watch it online and get their learning from it too.
That's the idea. I mean, thank God for the internet. You know? How did we do anything without this? And people say to me all the time, and I know you hear this all the time, that there's an awakening coming, you know, and consciousness is rising faster and faster. I kind of don't really go with that because I think that kind of awakening and expanding consciousness is always happening. It's not happening now more than at any other time. But because of the internet, it kind of is happening now more than any other time because we have so much information. I mean, when could you have ever just sat down and just pushed this little screen here and read about what happens after you die?
Yeah.
You could never do that.
Do a quick Google search. What happens after death?
That's exactly what people type into Google.
That's amazing. Well, and so we do have a couple of viewer questions. The first one is, what has been your greatest learning? Like the biggest, oh my goodness.
Oh, are these questions from people out there in television land?
Internet land.
Personally, my personal greatest learning has been, this is so simple, everyone will laugh, that you can't make anybody do anything. That's my biggest lesson in all of life. It's, you know, and this is a big piece of what I talk about in my forgiveness workshop, is the biggest pain we feel in relationships is always 100% of the time that the other person didn't do what we wanted them to do.
Oh, yeah.
Period. There is nothing else. And how amazing would it be to let go of that? And I think that, you know, older people who've been married for 60 years, they finally figure it out.
They figured it out.
But it takes till they're 70. But that's been my biggest thing. And I think in general, for a lot of people, I think maybe the biggest thing people learn or hope to learn is that there is no death. Think of how huge that is. We don't really die.
That's so confronting to me.
Yeah.
So what do you call it when your body stops?
Well, I guess you'd call it death. You know, you'd call it clinical death. Okay. But that's just your body. Okay. Your body stops doing stuff.
Yeah.
But there's an essence of you that's not this body. Mm-hmm. So this is explained in a book called The Atheist Afterlife. A wonderful book. And he says, think of it this way. You're driving a car, and you go out of control and go off a cliff. Down to the cliff, crash, you die. The car blows up. Mm-hmm. The smoke and the fire, the car turns into smoke and fire, which is energy, right? And heat. And the car eventually turns into rust, and the rust turns into minerals that go in the soil and grows the trees. And you, who died in this crash, your body gets taken away by the paramedics, but your energy still continues somewhere as well, because it's some kind of theory called the continuation of energy or something. Everything continues.
Yeah.
Nothing ever stops.
Yeah.
And so the body will die just like a plant or a carrot in your refrigerator. It gets old and it dies. This is physical matter, this stuff. It's organic. It's not meant to live forever. But when you start to look at people's near-death accounts and mediumship accounts, there's absolute evidence that something stays. Otherwise, how could they see, when they're dead on the table, how could they report that they saw a shoe up on the ledge on the 9th floor of the hospital?
Yeah.
How could that be?
Well,
there's so many stories like that.
It makes me think of a lot of people relate to their bodies as them,
Yes.
like physically or just mentally, the whole thing. I mean, this is who I am. And I mean, that leads to all sorts of different complications in life and disappointments and things like that. And sometimes being really happy, but it's not. I mean, I don't know how to say this, but it's like, if you cut me open, there would be organs and blood and things like that, but there wouldn't actually be me.
Yeah.
Like there is no, that my thoughts and opinions, I mean, things that I have that I say don't exist anywhere physically.
Well, unless you wrote a book or something,
yeah.
And some people will say, well, that's your legacy. That's what you leave. You write a book, you have children, you leave these things. That's very much the physical only, like in the Jewish tradition, they don't really believe in a soul that continues eternally without a body. And so what you'll hear in that tradition as well, you had a meaningful life. You had children and grandchildren. You helped the poor. That was the purpose of your life. But another way to look at that is, think of this. If we came from non-existence, we come into existence and we live 73 years, and then we go back to non-existence, what was the point?
Yeah.
And then that goes back to that theology of, well, we don't know, it's random and pointless, and we have no meaning. So what was the point of living? Well, then some people would say, well, to have children and write books and help the poor. Well, then they're all going to go through this same cycle too. So I have children, and they came from non-existence. They lived 73 years, and then they go back to non-existence. What was the point of that? Is it just perpetually creating bodies forever for no reason?
Yeah. So what do you think is the point? I've never thought about it that way, so
it is an interesting way to think about it. Yeah. And this is the kind of stuff I want people to think about.
Yeah.
This is the stuff.
You're doing a really good job.
So what do I think is the point? Well, this is what my guides have explained to me, is that if we all come from this big soup of creation, or like Abraham says, like Esther Hicks Abraham says, in the beginning, there was just a stream of energy, or just a blob or a mist of energy. And in this energy was all the possibilities of creation. And somewhere, now we're sort of getting into Course in Miracles explanation, somewhere in that energy, some aspect of that energy thought, I think I'd like to experience myself a little bit differently, from a different perspective. I think I'm going to jump out of this energy, see what it's like over here. Well, is it even possible to be separate from that energy? Because that's everything, which is God, actually. But some aspect decided to separate from that oneness into two-ness. And in doing that, physical matter was created from that intention. And so if we understand that oneness is always there, the purpose of incarnation is to go out and have experiences, to experience physicality. Because it's great just hanging out in the ether, but there's no real challenges, there's nothing to rub up against it. Or as my son said, it's like when you're swimming and you push off the edge of the pool to give yourself a push. There needs to be something to push off of. And so that's why we come to physical incarnation. And then we bring back all our wisdom and experience into that central source,
Yes.
so that it expands and all of creation feeds off of all of experience. And it just goes on and on forever, I guess.
Huh.
I don't know. Does it ever end? I have no idea.
Well, and it just makes me think that we all get all twisted up in all of these little weird things in life, and if the whole point of being here is to experience life and to go out and try new things and all that stuff, then why don't we just go do that?
Well, we do. We just aren't conscious of what we're doing.
Oh, okay.
Right? So we go out and we get sick and we get our hearts broken and we have joy and we get married and we have babies and then something else bad happens and then there's an earthquake and you lose your job and all of that. It's all part of it.
All part of the experience of life.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Well, thank you. Well, I want to mention again, we do have up just until this Sunday the Afterlife, the recording of the live broadcast of the Afterlife Awareness Conference that happened earlier this June for almost half price off. So it's $49.95, and you can get that, and it's 9 different videos of some fantastic speakers, and you can get that at www.beyondword.com/Daniel, Daniel. And remember, if you have questions, please use the hashtag BWPresents, or you can use the Google Hangouts app, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we do have another viewer question. So what has been the worst response you've received from sharing this information, and then how did you deal with that?
Does it say who's asking those
No,
questions?
it doesn't. It just says viewer question.
Oh, this is so funny. Whoever's asking that question, if people from my Facebook group are watching this, then you know this story. But I once had a channeled message about grief. And it came to me and it said that some people are stuck with their feet in cement on Grief Street. And you don't have to be stuck there. You can walk around the corner and look down to the next block, and there's a whole different neighborhood over there. Or you can go take the elevator up in the high-rise building up to the penthouse and see the view from up there. Or you can go down in the subway. I'm visioning, a city street. Go down to the subway and see what's down there underneath the surface, in the subconscious. There are all these different things you can do and places you can go with your grief. You don't have to just be stuck on Grief Street. You can turn the corner. This was my little revelation. It created a Facebook firestorm. I put it on Facebook. It got viral. It went to all the grief groups. And people yelled and screamed at me for about 3 weeks. And called me every name in the book. And they were so angry. And they said, I don't want to turn the corner. I'm never going to get over my grief until I have my daughter back. Yeah. And, I don't want spiritual lessons. Screw spiritual lessons. I just want this to have never happened. And so this is obviously, it did happen.
Yeah.
And the kid's not coming back. And we have to understand this process of life and death and loss in order to be at peace. These people were not at peace, but it went on for 3 weeks. Anyway, one person said to me, "You're a terrible person. How could you be a hospice chaplain? You're a charlatan. What are you going to do? Write a book called Grief Street?" And I did. That's exactly what I did. I went, what a great title for a book.
Thank you.
And so I wrote a book called Turning the Corner on Grief Street, which starts out with this story about Facebook. So that was the worst, pretty much the worst thing, that happened.
Well, it seems like you very much presented it. It's like, these are choices. Just like you said, it's like the way we perceive death is a choice. The way we perceive grief is a choice. So it's like, yes, if they want to be on Grief Street, sure.
And it's okay to be on Grief Street. It's okay to feel your grief, but you don't have to live the rest of your life there. And you don't have to identify yourself as a suffering person. You don't have to suffer. I mean, you do have to suffer for a period of time, of course, but the suffering doesn't have to cripple you forever. And you can find joy again. A lot of people feel that being in pain keeps you connected to your loved one, because grief is really love. And I've had a child die. I know what that feels like. And you feel it in your heart. It aches. It's horrible. But when I feel that, and I still feel it, it hits me hard at times, just like anybody else, I feel my heart opening. And I think it was David Kessler who said, a broken heart is an open heart. And I say, this crack that you feel is not a break, it's an opening. And so when you're feeling that deep grief, you're really feeling deep love. Yeah. And that's what keeps you connected to your loved one, not the pain. And I see a lot of people who, let's say their loved one got, murdered. They spend their whole life going to court and trying to, put the murderer in jail. Vengeance, and, I will never forgive that person. And that doesn't serve anybody. And the dead person doesn't want you to do that. And we know that from so many mediumship readings where they say that to us. So.
Well, and you're a forgiveness counselor, and we have a couple of books on forgiveness, and one of the things that has become very, very clear to me is that forgiveness isn't for that person over there that you're mad at. It's for you. Yeah. It's for, so you can live the rest of your life in hope and...
Yeah. Well, so you can unhook from it. And, you don't forgive a person. You forgive an experience. So if you did something bad to me, forgiving you as a person doesn't mean anything because you're on your own path. If you're going to be an axe murderer, that's what you are. That's not in my control. You have to work that out. I have to forgive the experience of you coming into my house and killing my husband. I have to let go of my attachment to the randomness of that experience and try to understand that experience in a different way. Have you ever heard, if any of you listening to this want to see the most perfect example of this, Google Ram Dass's letter. I think if you just say letter from Ram Dass or letter from Ram Dass about a child who died, it is the most amazing thing in the world. These parents had this little girl who was stabbed or some brutal murder, and Ram Dass wrote a letter to them explaining pretty much what I just said. It's unbelievable. So go Google that.
Okay, that's great. Well, I mean, one of the other things that I would just love for you to share with the viewers as well is, what is it that you really want people to get out of coming and participating in the Afterlife Awareness Conference? Like, what have you seen people get out of it? And then for this coming year, which is going to be in Norfolk, Virginia in the early June. Have you guys nailed down the dates?
June 4th through 7th.
Yeah, so be sure to put that on your calendar. But what is it that you hope that people will get out of that conference?
That there are other worlds besides this one. This is not all there is. And I guess we have to learn that through understanding death and interdimensional communication. But this is an interdimensional, multidimensional existence. And so, a lot of times, I just graduated from theology school, right? So I'm
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm still very steeped in biblical analysis when I talk. And so if you look at the scriptures, you'll see so much evidence of that in all the stories, Old Testament and New Testament, about all the prophets and the people that were having visions and visitors from other worlds. And my favorite biblical piece on that is Jesus saying, "In my Father's house are many mansions." And so these multiple levels of awareness and dimensions are the many mansions. That's what I think he meant. And you can look at the whole Bible that way. And great book on that, by the way, is A Metaphysical Interpretation of the Bible by Stephen Harefield, one of my favorite teachers. Anyway, so that would be my message. There's so much more to it than this little body, this little drama, these identities, husband, father, mother, child. That's all good, but those are costumes that we're wearing to this particular party, and there are many parties and many costumes.
I just have to say, I've very, very much enjoyed talking with you, and I'm just so stimulated right now, and there's so many things that are popping for me, and I was really fascinated. Oh, do we have another viewer question? I'm not seeing it. So pause, slight technical difficulties. And while we figure that out, I just want to let everybody know one more time that we do have the recording of the live broadcast of the Afterlife Awareness Conference that happened this last June available for about half price off, $49.95. And again, There's a little bit of technical stuff around it, and if you read the description on the website, www.beyondword.com/Daniel, Daniel, it'll give you all the details, but the short version of it is that you will get your, you need to purchase by this Sunday, and you will get your code and instructions on how to download and watch those on Monday the 7th. And it's still not coming through, so I'm going to hand this to our technical person right now, just 1 second, so we can make sure to get that question answered. And
what a fine technical person she is.
What a fine technical
really
she
great.
does. She was a great help in. She's always a great help in all of these things. She's always behind the camera, so you guys never get to see her, although occasionally she does pop up. But and while we're still getting that, I'll just let everybody know that next week we do have Dr. Patricia Reba. She is the co-author of a book called Fit Kids Revolution, and she's really addressing the obesity epidemic that we do have with our kids right now. And she will give us all sorts of pointers, and she really is calling for a revolution so that we can stop what's happening now. And she also does it without using the words diet or exercise. So that's going to be a great show. Be sure to be here, same time, same place next time. And here we have the question. Hi, Terry. It's Ron C. from Facebook. I wanted to know whether or not you agree with Dr. Moody that science will not and cannot prove the existence of a soul or afterlife.
Hi, Ron. Sorry you missed the conference this year. Ron's one of our great fans. Yeah, I do think I agree with him. And, you know, Ron, you've probably seen us have this discussion on Facebook many times about who needs proof and who doesn't. So if you want absolute proof that there's an afterlife in absolute scientific terms, I don't think you're going to find that. Because so much of this is tied up in, back to what we were talking about, intuitive trust and intuitive knowing, that I think we're supposed to learn how to trust it in our heart and not in our mind. And so science as we know it, and that's a big caveat, I don't think has a whole lot of chance of proving this in a bona fide, triple-blind, peer-reviewed, academic, scientific way. However, Julie Beischel and Gary Schwartz have done those kinds of experiments with mediums, and they have been able to prove that something's going on. But I think we're quite a ways away from that right now, and so we don't have to wait for science to do that in order to start proving it to ourselves in our own life, in our own experience. Because I'm totally convinced, because I've seen it and I've been there. And anybody that you talk to who's had a near-death experience will tell you, you can't tell me that doesn't exist. I was there.
Yeah, it's so real.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we as people, I think just as a general populace, we always look for proof. And being able to trust our intuition in ourselves. It's almost like we'll probably never get proof, like on the grand scale for all of human beings, proof such that every single person who sees said proof would be like, oh yes, okay, yes, get it. It's the proving it within yourself and having your own personal experience, be it a near-death experience or communicating with somebody from the other side, whatever that is. It's just a very personal kind of proof.
Well, because that's all there is, really, isn't there? Because we're experiencing the universe from this perspective in here. Yeah. So, there are things that have been proven that people still don't believe, and there are things that are impossible to prove that people do believe. So everybody's evolving along that path at their own pace, in their own way.
Yeah.
And so we have to forget, at least for me, I'm not interested in proving anything to anybody. So when people ask me questions about that, I'm just like, I'm so busy, I don't have time to try to prove this to you.
Well, and that's maybe the journey that person needs to go on in order to find it for themselves. And you telling them is not going to do anything. Like, even if you turned yourself inside out, saying everything that you've ever experienced and pouring your heart out to them, and that still doesn't do anything because they are on their own journey,
which goes back to what you asked me before, but you can't make anybody do anything. There you have it. It comes full circle.
It's true. Well, Terri, thank you so much for coming in, and thank you so much for being on Beyond Words Presents. And I have just absolutely been fascinated, and I just so appreciate your openness and your willingness to answer my kind of crazy questions. And I realized some of the questions that I asked were really intimate after I asked them. So thank you
they're
so
great,
much.
great questions. I
Thank
appreciate it. Thank you too.
Well, we will see you guys again next week with Dr. Reba, and hopefully we will have Terri back on again later in the year as we get closer to the next Afterlife Awareness Conference. So thank you so much and have a great day.